Welcome to edition 69, part 3 of our Killa No Filla podcast with me, Rachel Fairburn, and Kiri Pritchard-McLean. Just before we start, we'll do our usual disclaimer. This isn't hero worship. We do this podcast because we mutual interest in serial killers. As long as we are doing this podcast, it stops us from writing to them in prison. Nah.
Every time we sit down to write it, we'll be there going through it all, and we'll be like 2 hours in, and we'll be like, we're going to have to do another part. I'm worried that this is going to turn into like some mad opus like Police Academy.
It's weird because I can't believe we ever did it in an hour live with Ed Gamble.
Well, I imagine it wasn't the most respectful rendition. I imagine we skirted over some details.
Yeah, I imagine it was key points and a bit of a romp.
Well, it's interesting that there is so much information. I do think it's something about the time and the location. Obviously, he killed a lot of women as well, but it really seemed to capture the tabloid emotions. So that
she's having a yawn.
I was having a yawn. Don't worry, I'll cut out that awkward gap. But it looked like I imagine for Rachel that the sound had gone, and I was just screaming at her with my eyes closed.
You were just screaming, yeah. My boyfriend took a picture of his pet dog, his mum and dad's pet dog Bella the other day as it was yawning, and his mum said, "Oh, she must be tired." He said, "No, she was screaming." Just had enough.
You know what I think is because the tabloids were. This sold papers for them, which meant that anytime anyone died, they did a lot of digging around their personal life and all the people they know, which means that we have more to talk about.
Yeah, so we left you the turning point for the investigation because the girl that was murdered, Jen McDonald, wasn't a sex worker, and this is where the public were like, oh no, it's an innocent woman.
Yeah.
It's just that horrible sort of thing of making the distinction between women and sex workers,
and also innocence. It's hideous.
I mean, if I got murdered tomorrow, let's be honest, I'm not innocent. God, so imagine some of the grubbiness they could pull up about
Fortnite
me.
bummer murdered in horrific circumstances. Anus remained intact. You're like a wombat. I did a radio panel show at the London Zoo recently. Don't message me, I don't approve of zoos, I didn't know it was going to be recorded there. Let's move on. And there was a woman there who knew a lot about wombats, and you know they do square poos.
Like a patty?
Like it's like a...
Like a Scottish sausage?
No, it looks like, you know the thing that you put chalk on the end of a pool cue with? It looks like a brown one of those. It's like the same dimensions.
Oh, God.
And they have a plate of bone in their arse. So when they're being attacked, they'll, like, run down their burrow and then stick their arse out because their arse can take a hammering. And it made me think of you.
Do you know what? Thank you so much. That is... What a lovely way to think of me. Thank you. Good God. Jesus Christ.
Do you do square poos, mate?
In actual fact, don't ever think of me ever again. If I pop into your head, don't even think of me. Don't visualise me. Don't remember me. Just forget about me. It's weird because we're doing this on Zoom, as a lot of people are recording things. It's weird. I've been watching some stuff, people... I know it's going to sound really bitchy, but I'm just going to say it, and it just reminded me. So, some people are just trying to put content out, and then I saw a couple of people the other day, I don't know why I mentioned this, trying to do, like, a live thing together. And the first 3 minutes of the live video, with them going, is it working?
Oh, God.
Can they hear us? Is anyone here?
No.
But I didn't want to watch it, but I sat through and watched all that, and then I rewound it.
Jesus.
I know.
It's really bringing out the nana in people, isn't it?
I can't talk because I did have to get my boyfriend to even send this Zoom meeting ID today, didn't I? So, yeah, I'm not good with technology. Do you know what I think part of the problem is? I'm not interested.
Yeah.
And if I'm not interested in something, you cannot get me to engage with it at all. Not interested. Poker. That's something that crops up about 3 times a year. Oh, do you want to learn how to play poker? Absolutely not. Not interested.
Really?
And then any card... You know what I'm like with card games? You can show me and I'm going, yeah, just doesn't sink in, just not interested. Anything mathematical, couldn't give a fuck. Anything, yeah, just... If I'm not interested, you will not get me to engage with it. And I hate being like that, but unfortunately... I think it's too late to change now.
That's the spirit, mate. So,
yeah.
we start Saturday, the 9th of July, 1977.
Maureen Long. Now, this lady has been on quite a lot of the documentaries, hasn't she? talking about what happened to her. So this is July 9th, 1977. This was just 2 weeks after the attack on Jane McDonald. So this is Peter Sutcliffe's 4th attack in a year, and it's only July. She'd been out, Peter that evening, Peter Sutcliffe, why am I calling him Peter? Peter had been out with his friends. Peter Sutcliffe had been out with his friends that evening, and very savvy of him, he drops his friends at home after the pub, but he doesn't go straight home as he says he's going to do. He goes round the area Lum Lane because he knows that there's a lot of sex workers around there. He knows there's a lot of pubs and there's a lot of women on the road.
Yeah, this is in Bradford.
Now, so Maureen Long had been out drinking, and she'd recently split up with her husband, I think, and she'd gone to Tiffany's, which keeps popping up, and she'd been to the Bally High discotheque. Now, Bally High sounds like a club that's named to sound like it's exotic, but in actual fact, it's probably awful.
Yeah, it just means they serve Malibu behind the bar. That's all it means.
Yeah. Well, there's my enduring memory of dreadful nightclubs, Idols in Manchester.
Where was that?
Well, that was on Oldham Street, but we used to go when we were at school, which, when I think back, I'm like, we were definitely too young. Well, we looked too young to be in there. It was fucking awful. Idols and the Lazy Pig. The Lazy Pig, you went downstairs and it was all barrels and stuff, but upstairs Idols thought it was a bit trendy. And I remember the bar staff used to wear like cut-off white denim shorts and crop tops and stuff, and it was that light that what's it, the UV light in there.
Oh God, where you can see all the jizz on everyone.
Awful. Oh God, it was such an awful thing. And that and the Isobar, under Affleck's Palace, bloody awful. In fact, the other day I was thinking, because we stuck inside, I was like, I'd actually like to go to a nightclub, and then I was like, no, things aren't that bad.
No, I think I would enjoy it. Actually, I went for the producer of this podcast, Anna, for her hen night. We went to a crazy house. I might have told the story before, in Liverpool, which is really good because it's like 3 floors and they play different music on each. So it's like metal on the middle, bottom floor, sort of indie on the middle one, and then sort of pop in indie on the top floor. And so we're having a lovely dance on the second floor. And we're all sort of in our 30s, and it's really good if you go there and you're not trying to fuck anyone. Like if you just go for a dance, it was really fun. But there was loads of sort of 19-year-olds sidling up to us and asked one of us, "Why are you so old?" When we replied with how old we are. He just went, "Why are you so old?"
Do you know what? I hope when that little fucker gets to, say, 50, I hope he has all the associated medical issues with being 50. Why are you so fucking old? I hope his knees hurt. I hope his back goes. I hope he has to take a lot of time off work because he's struggling a bit. That's why. Why are you so fucking old, you little fucking piece of shit? Like, you're never gonna get old. Oh.
He's 18 with moderate A-level results. He's not gonna have, and he's drunk, he's not gonna have loads of forethought. I'll let him off.
Hey, listen, I've been 18 with no A-level results and 4 GCSEs, and I've never had a fucking stinking attitude like that. Awful. Why are you so old?
So she leaves the nightclub hammered about 2 o'clock in the morning, and she's waiting at the taxi rank. Now, I think she's waiting for her ex-husband to pick her up.
She'd arranged to go to her ex-husband's house that evening.
Yeah, so she's waiting for a taxi. And then this white car pulls up, Peter Sutcliffe is inside, and he gets her in the car.
He's inside. That sounds really weird.
What? He's inside the car?
Peter Sutcliffe was inside the car. I don't know why it's made me. It's not funny. But
is this what happens when we record at 9 o'clock in the morning?
A white car pulled up. Peter Sutcliffe was inside. I don't know why it's funny. It suggests he was being driven rather than he was driving.
All right. Okay. So Peter Sutcliffe was driving said white car. Now he drives her to Bowling Back Lane,
which is just waste ground. So they'd had a discussion in the car about, he asked if she was doing business. Then they have a conversation. She asked, "Oh, do you fancy me?" and stuff like that. And then he takes her to this sort of waste ground, and she'd asked as well. She was like, "Please, can you not drop me off in front of my house? Because my ex-husband's in there. He's an ex-boxer," and she described him as a spoil sport, which I think is worse than calling someone an absolute cunt, isn't it? Oh, you spoil sport.
Yes.
It seems more hurtful,
It's more
doesn't it?
barbed.
It suggests more, yeah. Now, she gets out of the car, she goes for a wee. Now, Peter Sutcliffe takes the opportunity and he hits her with the hammer. And because it's waste ground, there's a watchman doing his thing, and he's got an Alsatian with him. And then Peter Sutcliffe hears a dog barking, which is the watchman's Alsatian, and it panics him. So the watchman's having a look round, he can't see anything happening. He notes the time as 3:27am. Now, Peter Sutcliffe, as happens quite often, he spooks quite a lot, isn't he? So by cars, by dogs, he does a runner very quickly. But poor Maureen, because 8:30am the next morning...
He didn't just hit her, though.
2 women.
As she was falling...
Of course,
he stabbed her in the abdomen and the back. So, like, she was kind of done for. But you're right, she was there in the morning, wasn't she?
I mean, it's amazing that she survived, because at 8:30 the next morning, which is a long time from potentially, 3:27, 2 women were walking across the waste ground, and they heard crying. They thought someone had abandoned a baby. They could hear this, really sort of weak cry. So they start looking, and then they see Maureen, and of course then they get some help for her. So the police, she's taken to hospital. Was it Leeds Infirmary?
She's taken to Bradford first, and then because the injuries are so bad, she's moved to Leeds General Infirmary. By this point, Leeds must be like, oh, it's another one. Do you know what I mean? Because I know it's a really big hospital, but there's a lot of women coming in where they're having to repair their skulls. Or is this me being absolutely naive and that is sort of business as usual at a big hospital in a city? I don't know.
Yeah, you don't know, do you? Because you think I guess it's the same surgery team or similar people working on it. You think they were going, hang on a minute, this is another similar attack.
So she goes to Leeds to have major neurological surgery. Now, before she goes into the surgery, George Oldfield is like, let me talk to her, which doesn't seem like the most sympathetic thing to do, but...
No, but then again you think, I'm not sticking up for him because I think he's awful, but maybe in that situation, you're just thinking, she might die while she's having surgery. Any information we can get is going to be helpful. But then at the same time, it is like, fucking hell, this woman's just had this massive head trauma that needs emergency surgery. She's not going to be in any kind of... So I don't think there's any good decision.
No, and to be honest, after she had the surgery, she couldn't remember much anyway. So he talked to her and he found out that she remembers leaving Tiffany's, she remembers getting a lift, and then she described her attacker. She said that he was white, he had a large build, he was about 35, with light brown shoulder-length hair, big hands and puffed up cheeks, and he was about 6 foot, which is nothing like Peter Sutcliffe at all. And she says his car was either yellow or white or blue, and then, she had the surgery and she couldn't remember any details, really. So because of... They were going to link it to the Yorkshire Ripper, but because the description was so far away from him, they didn't really pay much attention to it, other than the fact...
what they could have paid attention to was the fact that it was the same kind of scenario and the same fucking injuries that the other women had had, and not just relying on the statement of a woman who's just been through a massive traumatic event that has caused her to have brain injuries. That might have been an idea.
Well, to be fair, they did follow it up. They did, and the car as well was quite a clue. So Maureen spends 6 weeks in hospital and then a further 3 weeks in a convalescing home before she's able to go back to her house. Now, she's got no income when she does. She's on £13 a week social security, which is nothing. So in 1978, she actually appears, she's got a criminal record because she was in Bradford court for shoplifting from 3 different shops. But because she had no money, she's too sick to work. And, she said, in the court case, she said, listen, I'm waiting for compensation for a crime. And she got 300 quid, was what she got. And they fined her 75 quid for the shoplifting. And then...
That is cruel.
They did eventually, they did eventually sort of pay out. In April 1979, she was given £1,500, which she appealed as in, that's a bit low. And so they gave her £12,500 in the bit in between, and she would basically give interviews for money because she what else has she got to live on? She's taken away her independence and her ability to work or have any kind of normal life, so you would sell your story. So started to set up interview rooms at Tiffany's nightclub. So, like, you go there and pay £1 for your cloak, and then someone...
It's £1 a cloak.
And then someone would be sat there in an interview room. So this took... 304 officers working full-time on this by then. They interviewed 175,000 people. They took 12,500 statements, and they checked...
175,000 people?
Yeah. That's a lot of people in a nightclub, isn't it? No one's listening to the fire eggs there, are they?
I hate when people say 1 out, 1 in.
Really?
It's 1 in, 1 out.
1 out, 1 in? No.
Yeah, it's not like...
No, you can only come in when one's gone out. 1 out, now 1...
Oh, no. What was it? No, when people say... 1 out.
No, they say 1...
1 out, 1 in always suggests to me, like when they're saying it about shops at the minute now as well, it's always like they're suggesting, we're holding you here until somebody appears there, and then we'll let you out. You can only go out when someone comes in.
Oh, when they say 1 in, 1 out. Right.
Yeah. That. It just sounds stupid, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like, you wait there, because there's no one coming in, so you've got to wait here.
You're in here now until someone can swap you out.
Could be an hour. We're
tag teaming this Asda. They checked 10,000 cars, bearing in mind they had quite a vague description of it. The night watchman had made a note of the car. He said it was a white Ford Cortina Mark II. Now, the problem with that is, and why they ended up checking 10,000 cars, that was the car that most taxi drivers drove at the time. So it would be like now saying, oh, the guy who got me was in a Prius in central London. You'd be like, okay, well, that is every single taxi driver who's there.
I was going to say, he panics, because what he does then, he realises that the car's been described really well. So the next day when he sees the information about the attack in the papers, Peter Sutcliffe said that he got a nasty shock that she hadn't died, and he got rid of his hammer, he threw that away, and also he sold his car to his friend. Now the car actually broke down, so his friend was like, can you come and take this piece of shit car and take it back? So he took it back, and because he was still panicking, he used the parts from his car and took it to bits and replaced bits in his red Corsair. As I was saying to you, that is a bit of this story that a lot of men would be more interested in than the police investigation or the murder, wouldn't it? Like, I wonder what I did with those parts. Oh, a bit of refurbishing a vehicle. Perfect. My kind of story. But the taxi drivers, they got questioned.
Yeah, they thought it was a taxi driver for a long while, and it does make sense that they're out late at night, clearly moving around freely. In fact, they harassed one taxi driver in particular. It was a guy called Terry Hawkshaw. Now, he lived alone with his mum. He was 36. He sort of fitted the description. He had dark hair, he had a beard, so most of those descriptions he ticked the box off. They became obsessed with Terry Hawkshaw being the murderer. They put him under 24-hour surveillance. They would follow him when he would be out on his taxi rounds. They would follow him to the pub. They got a search warrant. They went through his house. They went through his uncle's tool shed. They took clothing from the house. They took hair samples. They took his carpets from his car. They took blood samples from him. They were really sure that this was the guy. Which is, in a way, you're like, well, they're really working hard doing some policing there. But then you're like, well, they didn't do all this to Peter Sutcliffe, who they spoke to 9 times, so obviously just someone high up's got it in his head that poor old fucking Terry living with his mum is murdering women. Yeah. So he's questioned absolutely loads, because also he lived in a location that was sort of central to all the murders that they knew about then. On one occasion they brought him in for questioning, and they brought him in at 8 o'clock at night, and they questioned him through the night and then kicked him out at 8 a.m. Like, I would just be like, yeah, I did it. If you asked me something at 4 o'clock in the morning, I would admit to a string of murders. Like, I'd be so sleep deprived.
Taxi driver though, he's got stamina.
That's true.
When it comes to staying awake.
That's true. So Peter Sutcliffe gets rid of this car. He sells it on August the 31st. And now, just before that, on August 18th, 1977, he buys a house, and Sonia starts her job at Homefield School in Bradford. So, they're definitely, embarking on the next bit of their life together. At the end of September, he buys a new red Ford. It's the same car, but it's red this time.
Mm-hmm. So everything's a bit quiet for a couple of months. And on the 1st of October 1977, there's another murder. Now, he moves locations this time, so he's trying to shake things up a bit. He doesn't go very far from Leeds. I mean, it's a good hour and a half, I'd say, back then, driving. He goes to Manchester. Now, this next murder is Jean Jordan. So it's the 1st of October 1977. Jean was also known as Jean Royal. She was Scottish. She was known to a lot of her friends as Scotch Jean. She was a sex worker, and she'd ran away from home at age 16 from Scotland and come to Manchester. She had 2 children, and she lived with a bloke called Alan Royal, who was described as a common law husband. Now, I think she was only 20 years old at this point, which says to me, like, whenever I hear about somebody like, they were born in this place and then they ran away and then they had 2 kids, and then you go, what, they're only 20? You're like, all the stuff that's happened and that you've fitted in, sometimes it's incredible, isn't it?
And also it's quite a lot of, obviously, chaos and tragedy for someone very young as well. This is what her life, reading about it, reminds me of the book I've just read about the victims of the Jack the Ripper, where you're like, you know, and be like, and then she had been in an asylum, then she'd been in a workhouse, and then she'd been an alcoholic, and like, so at 21 she decides to make a fresh start, and you're like, she's 21, like, yeah, absolutely,
it's mad, isn't it?
Mad. The reason he went to Manchester was because he'd been tinkering with his new car, and he wanted to test drive the like modifications that he made. So, like, that makes it more irritating, I think. Jean, who's living with Alan, in fact, it's quite sad. She obviously fled Scotland. And on her first day in Manchester, she was like, right, I'm just going to move. First day in Manchester, she meets Alan, who's quite a bit older than her. And then after that, they just live together. Now, I would love to think, I don't know Alan, I've got no beef with Alan, but I'd love to think that she's lucky enough to have the first man she meets to be a golden knave who's going to take care of a young 20-year-old with a chaotic background. But part of me thinks he might have been a bit of a knob.
Yeah, it's not worth getting into, is it? But it doesn't sound like it was the best, does it? It doesn't sound like it was the best relationship.
So there's...
they lived in Moss Side, Lingbeck Crescent. And at this time, Moss Side, fucking hell, that time of... I mean, I lived in Moss Side for a while. It's quite a tasty area. It's not like what it used to be, but in the late 70s, early 80s...
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? Within 2 years, they'd had their 2 kids. So Alan was the oldest one, Alan Jr.
Alan Jr.
And then 2 years later, they had James. And so they were living together when she was murdered, but they were kind of living separate lives. They were separated, but still living together. But they had an all right relationship, because there's a very weird detail in this about a lemonade bottle. So... She says to Alan, would you like a lemonade? And pours it for him. This is on October 1st. And she says, oh, I'm going to go out tonight, just so you know. And he's like, all right, okay. This lemonade bottle does become relevant. Now, when she said, I'm going out tonight, he assumed that she was going out with her girlfriends. She had a group of lasses she was mates with who were also sex workers. He assumed that that's what she was doing and sort of didn't ask any questions and left her to it.
Because he went out as well. So when he'd come back, she's still not there and the kids were asleep, so he's like, oh, she's still out. But this goes on for a long time because she still doesn't come home. So the next day he assumes that she's gone on one of her unannounced trips to Scotland. In actual fact, what she'd done that evening, she had gone out to do some sex work, and Peter had actually familiarised himself with Manchester because he'd gone on previous trips with his mates for nights out. So he was kind of like, he was getting to know the area, and he thought, well, this would be a good way to throw police off the scent if I do a murder in a different place. So he arrives in South Manchester, Moss Side area, and he sees Jean and she sees him, and at first she's actually going to get in another car with somebody, but she changes her mind when she sees him in his car, which is just awful. So she says, oh, I was almost going to get in that car, but you know, so this happens a couple of times actually with a couple of the women, that they were almost going to get in another one, and then they see him and get in that. So this was on Princess Road in Chorlton. It was an allotment, part of Southern Cemetery, and it was part, which is a huge cemetery. I mean, if you're from Manchester, you'll know it. If you're not, it's like, it spans about 4 districts, Southern Cemetery.
It's huge.
It's like everyone in the world buried there.
Yeah. And you drive around Manchester and you're like, am I still driving alongside this? Like, you'll drive for miles and miles.
So the area that they go to is a popular haunt of sex workers and courting couples, and as the car is stopped, they discuss the price, and she says it'll be £5. He gives her the money first because I guess a lot of times I guess people have decided not to pay or just done a runner or got aggressive. So she takes the £5 that he gives her the £5 note, folds it up and puts it in a secret pocket in the front of her handbag. So that's covered, that's fine. Now, as they arrive at the place, he attacks her, obviously. And he is with the hammer and he mutilates her as well.
Yeah, he really is horrific. He hits her 13 times with a hammer. He then hides the body in a bit of undergrowth near the fence between the cemetery and the allotments. And it's just a path goes right past the body that lots of people use. Does he look for the fiver then?
He sort of realises, it's when he gets back in the car and he's driving off that he realises. Now, Jean's injuries were so bad that even after when they do find a body, the injuries to her head had made her unrecognisable anyway.
Well, we're not even going to talk about it, but it's, if that floats your boat, you can Google it. But, it's absolutely horrific what he does to her. Now, he drives home.
He realises then, as he's driving home, he thinks, fuck, the £5 note. This is the first time he's like, I've left some evidence, because it was a brand new £5 note. It'd been given to him in his pay packet, I think, that week. It was crisp, brand new. It had a serial number on it. He thought, oh my God, that £5 note could be traced back to me.
Which is quite bright.
Because I was saying to you, I was like, that is quite a sort of bright thought. But then I was like, but I've never had to think about anything like that. I've never had to cover my tracks so much that I've got to think about all these things.
Oh.
So he's panicking, he's driving home and he's thinking, right, I could go back now, but that would, might draw attention to me, or I could go back tomorrow, or I'll just see what happens. Now, he's expecting the body to be found the next day, so he's very surprised for the next couple of days that there's nothing in the papers at all. And he's thinking, why has nobody found this body? And then he's still thinking about the £5 note.
It's like the telltale heart, isn't it? Like, just obsessed with this £5 note and where it is. So they have this housewarming party,
which he's perfectly fine at. He's not. This is the 9th of October, so this is days and days after Jean's murder. Jean still hasn't been reported as missing by this point, I don't think.
No, Alan didn't report her missing.
So, I mean, I guess maybe she had that lifestyle that she went off quite a lot and didn't get in contact, but...
When these unexpected trips to Scotland, I bet they weren't unexpected. I bet it's when you had a fucking blazing row. And she's like, I'm going to Scotland, fuck you. I don't think he would have got home and she wouldn't have been there and just left 2 kids without saying anything. I think these unexpected trips were her going home to see her family because they'd had an argument.
Yeah. This housewarming party that they planned, which I imagine Sonia would have found very stressful, to be honest, because it's not going to be her mates, there, is it? It's just going to be like Trevor Birdsall, his girlfriend.
Oh, fucking Trevor's here again.
Oh, you've invited Trevor. It's going to be them. And the party is so wild that it finishes at midnight.
Woo!
Perfect.
10,
Perfect.
9, 8, get the fuck out of my house.
So, at midnight it is a new day and I don't want you in here. God.
Do you know the people who can't fucking leave after a party? It's like 11 o'clock the next morning and you're like, get out of my house.
It's awful, isn't it? I had that. I mean, I don't do things like I have these booze sessions as I used to anymore, but times I've had parties that you come down in the morning because I'm an early riser anyway, and people will still be there, like having a cup of tea or whatever, and then you're looking at your watch going, it's 2 o'clock and I want to go to Frankie and Benny's and I don't want you to come with me, so can you fuck off, please? There's no polite way, is there? But you should be able to say, that should be one of the rules of life. You should be able to say to somebody, can you get out of my house, please, and them not be offended.
I did it because I had, growing up, I lived in, one of the barns. And it's not like a barn conversion. It's basically a one-up, one-down shed that I did myself with plasterboard. And I used to have parties all the time, and I remember this one guy just wouldn't fucking leave. So I was like, I've got to go to work now. I just went to work, 4 hours early, so I just didn't have to be around him.
Oh, is it that they're the worst, aren't they? When you've got to inconvenience your day because some fucker won't go. Oh, it is the worst. It's that agitation, but also, how do these people not have the sense to see that they're not welcome anymore? You've drank everything I've bought. You've eaten the nibbles. Why are you still here? Please go.
Yeah, they just don't know, do they?
Do you remember when a couple of years ago when, in a moment of kindness, I allowed somebody to stay at my house, but they would not fucking go. Beep his name out.
Oh, yeah.
This was the week before Christmas. Christmas was creeping up. He'd been made homeless, fine. So I said, oh, you're more than welcome to stay for a couple of nights, because he said he had other plans. I was like, great, you can stay for a couple of nights. A couple of nights turned into a couple of fucking weeks, and the cunt was eating everything in the pissing house. And I was just like, when is this person going to go? And my boyfriend at the time, it was causing a lot of stress between us, and he wasn't, I mean, I'll speak freely now. He had no fucking backbone, that lad that I was with. And I was like, can you tell him, because he's your friend, he's going to have to go, because I can't have him in my house any longer. Oh, all right. Wouldn't say anything. And then, do you know when he left? Christmas Eve.
What?
Christmas, yeah. And I was just like, thank fuck for that, a cunt's gone. But then, and this is weird, and as long as his name's beeped out, I don't really care. A couple of days later, he messages us to tell us that his grandma, who had gone to stay with us, suddenly died. I was like, he's fucking put a pillow over her, bomb stare the old girl.
Jesus fucking Christ, Rachel.
No, I don't care, I'm telling you. And it was weird though, because he'd never mentioned his grandmother before, but in the time that he was at my house, he'd mentioned her all the time and really painted this picture of how close they were and how wonderful she was and what he was going to get for Christmas. And then all of a sudden, oh, Granny dies and now I can stay in her house. I mean, I'm not pointing any fingers.
Really? I think you've got a huge foam gladiator's finger that you're pointing at a pillow on his nana's bed.
With his name on. Anyway, this housewarming party finishes. He gets in his car, probably drops a couple of people off, because, great guy that he is. Then he decides, right, I'm going to drive back to Manchester, which, whenever I say back to Manchester, always reminds me of my dad, because whenever we came back from holiday as a child, he would be in a foul mood on the day that we came back, probably because he didn't want to drive all the way. And him and my mum would usually have an argument just as we got onto Princess Parkway that was, oh yeah, this again is it? And he'd go, yeah. And then he'd be like, oh, well, you back to Manchester, is it? Oh, back to Manchester. And that's all he'd say for about 10 minutes. Ho, 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 back to Manchester. And mum would go, yeah, back to Manchester.
What is that going? What's that about?
I have no fucking idea. But we still say, oh, back to Manchester in my family when someone's pissed off about something.
Did he want to live in Wales or something?
I don't know what he fucking wanted, but it was just... Thing is, my dad, as much as I love him, a miserable old bastard, and he just used to sulk, and it was absolutely every single time that we came back from holiday. Not that he enjoyed being on holiday, because he didn't get involved in anything. He'd drop us at a car boot sale and vanish, or we'd go to get chippy at a beach and he'd vanish, and then he'd just come back. Like he's never been a dad that's got involved with things. But yes, for some reason, back to Manchester. I mean, unless it relates to this, and that'd be fucking weird.
I mean, everyone was thinking that when you're like, he'd drop us off, we'd get chips, and he'd disappear somewhere for a few hours and then come back again in different clothes.
And the fact that he'd always say back to Manchester just as we get on Princess Parkway, which is where this has happened. Oh my God, hang on a minute. Got to ask some questions, Anna. So he goes back. Now, this is really unpleasant. I mean, the whole thing's unpleasant, but this is just really awful. So he goes back to the murder scene, and she's still there. But he's furious, so he tries to find the handbag that she had with the £5 note in it, and he can't find it anywhere. Now, he takes a hacksaw with him, and his hammer. Oh. So he goes into this, if you ask me, fully intending to do what he did. He goes back, and because he says that he's so angry that he can't find the handbag and the £5 note. And there's no nice way to say this. He decapitates her, cuts her head off, and it's gross. And he attacks her with a knife. Now this bit really pisses me. I mean, most of it pisses me off. But he slashes her stomach open. Bear in mind, this is a woman that's been dead for a number of days. And he says, oh, when I slashed her stomach open, it was such an awful smell that it made me, I had to go, I felt really physically sick and I had to recoil from it. It's like, oh, Peter, I'm ever so sorry.
Okay, no.
So it's just like everything he says is about him,
Yeah, totally. Centred in himself. He stabs her 18 times, and some of them are 8 inches deep. So he's in like a real fury. Alan, her partner, hadn't reported her, or ex-partner rather, hadn't reported her missing. Now, October 10th, the papers release a story that a woman's body has been found in the Southern Cemetery. She's been attacked. And he was like, oh, I wonder if it's her. And that was the first time that he thought anything. October 10th, she was at...
We must say who found the body, though. This is a... So if you are English, or particularly if you live in the north of England,
or British, mate,
British, whatever, I couldn't give a fuck. The popular soap Coronation Street, there used to be a character called Les Battersby in it, of the Battersby family, who were a real bunch of rogues when they first came into it. So 10:30 the next morning, the 10th of October, the actor Bruce Jones, who later went on to play Les Battersby in Coronation Street, he's with his work companion, Mr. Morrissey, and they're looking for house bricks for some reason. I'm not sure what it was that they did. They're looking for house bricks, and Bruce Jones, the actor, finds the body of Jean Jordan.
God.
Now, the body also was hidden near a wooden shed, so he'd moved her, and it was just 20 feet off a well-used footpath. If you see, there's lots of interviews with Bruce Jones. Now, he didn't actually come out and tell people when he became famous that he found this body, because, I mean, it would be a strange thing to mention, and the man is absolutely haunted by it.
Yeah, it's not an icebreaker, is it?
You can see interviews. No, you can see interviews with him, and it's like he says, there's not a day that goes by that he doesn't think about it. It was the press that years later, when he got into Coronation Street, of course, when somebody more so back then, I think, in the 90s, I don't think it happens as much now. They were doing some digging around about his past, and they spoke to people that he knew, and one of them said, "Oh, by the way, do you know that this happened?" And then it was all in the papers, and it was all on things. So he's like, I kind of didn't, I don't want to think about this all the time, and I don't really want to be associated with it. It's just something horrible that happened. But then it was splashed across all the papers, and people keep asking him about it, and it's just a bit fucking grubby, isn't it?
I think he had a problem with alcohol as an adult.
Yes, he said that was definitely part of the reason of his...
Yeah. Her body is found, and this is the thing, is like, it's no wonder that he had problems leading from it, because when you hear about how she was found and the condition she was in, it's absolutely horrific. She couldn't be identified. Her head and face couldn't be identified. He'd really, made such a mess of her. And how they, in fact, identified her in the end was they got her fingerprints and matched them. When they went to interview Alan, he was like, well, she did touch this lemonade bottle before she went out. She poured me a drink. So they got the fingerprints from the lemonade bottle. Now, her mate, Anna Holt, went to the police when this story was in the newspaper and was like, I think that's my friend, she's been missing for days now, and said, I want to see the body, and insisted on seeing the body, and then positively identified it as Jean. And it's a really interesting thing as well that Anna was saying before this happened, that Jean was like saying that she didn't want to do sex work anymore. She was like, you know what, I want to settle down and concentrate on being a mum, and I don't feel like this working as a sex worker is conducive to that, so I don't want to do it anymore. So Anna sort of maintains that she wasn't working as a sex worker at the time. She was just a woman who happened to be out and about. Now, off the back of this, Alan lost his job, and the kid as well, Alan Jr., suffered with very stunted speech. Basically could only sort of say one or two words by the age of 5, and they think it was because of the trauma of having his mother killed. Now, on Saturday the 15th of October, they find the handbag. It was only 100 yards away from the body, so I don't imagine the police have done an exhaustive search for it.
I'm not sure about this, because I think somebody's been moving things around and pissing about.
Really?
I wouldn't be surprised if somebody had found that bag, then maybe realised what it was and then just dumped it again. Because it just seems such a huge thing to miss. If a bloke called Mr. Cox, who's going to his allotment, can find the handbag after the police have done a huge search, I don't know, to me, I don't know if I wouldn't be surprised. It just feels to me like somebody had found it and then gone, oh
yeah,
fuck, I think, and then maybe took it back.
Yeah, that's a good point. Now, Alan, her ex-partner, was like, oh, I think she probably had about a tenner on her. Now, that money was never found. So they think the handbag, someone went through it and took the money out. So that would back up what you were saying. Now, because the £5 was in this hidden compartment, it was still in there. The whole time, every time I read about this hidden compartment, I'm like, how fucking good was this hidden compartment that you can... Like, because if you drive all the way from Bradford to Manchester and your only job is to find that £5 note, you would fucking tear that handbag open, wouldn't you? Like, you know, you would go through it. And the fact that this magic compartment is very, very impressive is what I'm trying to say. So the £5 note was still in there. So the police are like, great, okay, well, this is a new note. Just as Peter Sutcliffe suspected, it is a big clue. So they went to the Bank of England. The Bank of England confirmed the serial number was part of a shipment that was sent to Shipley and Bingley Midland banks. So it's gone in one of those two places. Immediately they make the Ripper connection, because they're like, right, well, that's his area. Because in removing Jean's head, he had tried to sort of, what's the word, like fudge the MO to make it look like it wasn't him, so they wouldn't link up the crimes.
But it was never released to the press or anybody that he had removed her head either.
Oh, okay, interesting.
So that was kept back. Yeah, he thought he was being really clever here. He thought, oh, you know, this is going to really throw him off the scent. They're not going to think this is connected to anything else.
Yeah, but as soon as they do the Shipley and Bingley thing, they're like, right, well, that has to be a Ripper thing. So this £5 note, it was part of, it's amazing they know all this, was part of a bundle of £500, and it was the 5th to last note in a sequence of 69. How mad is that they just know that? And this is in the 70s. So part of the batch of money was part of £17,500 went to a local factory, and so they were really focused on T and W.H. Clark, which is where he was working. They interviewed 8,000 men, and they took
including Peter
Sutcliffe. There was 8,000 men there, and they interviewed 5,000 of them, of which Peter Sutcliffe was one.
Yeah, and he was interviewed, but he had the strong alibi that he had that housewarming party that night.
Mad, right? He was interviewed just before Christmas as well. So this has gone on quite a while. So the next crime is December the 14th, and this is Marilyn Moore. She was near the Gaiety pub, which keeps coming up, doesn't it?
It does. She's walking up the road. She sees a dark car coming towards her. And leaning on the car is a man who she describes as 30, stocky, 5'6", with dark wavy hair and a beard. He's wearing a yellow shirt and jeans, and he appeared to be waving at somebody. What a picture of coolness.
Yeah, it really is, isn't it?
Leaning on his shit car, in his awful clothes, giving someone a wave. He later says that he tells her he was waving to his girlfriend.
That's such an alarm bell to me.
Which is such a weird... I'm just waving at my girlfriend as I'm picking up a woman to have sex with.
Yeah, because the first thing he says to her is,
have a nice evening.
Are you doing business? So really weird that he'd be like waving at his girlfriend and then picking her up. Maybe it's his way of being like, oh, she's fine with it. I don't know.
Just such a weird thing to do. Now, she agrees on the price. He says to her, oh, do you want to have sex on the back seat? Now, she realises the door's locked, I think, and then as she gets out to go into the back seat,
he drives her somewhere else for a start. He takes her to Scott Hall Street. Now, on this journey, he says he's called Dave, and this is when he starts planting the seed of his girlfriend. And yeah, he says, like, oh, why don't we have sex on the back seat? So she gets out, goes to open the back door, and it's locked. And as he comes to open it, he hits her on the back of the head with a hammer. So she covers her head with her hands and starts screaming, and she's screaming, Dave, 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 stop it, which is like something from Only Fools and Horses. She's screaming out the wrong fucking name. And as she's falling down, she grabs his trousers and like pulls them down, and he hits her again, and then she is sort of in and out of consciousness. Now, because of her screams of Dave, a dog starts barking, and he gets scared. He really, like, it doesn't take much to spook him, does it?
No, constantly a bit running off.
So she's sort of in and out of consciousness on the floor, and she hears him running around to the front of his car, getting in, and then the wheels skidding off because he's going so quickly. Now she tries to get up and walk to a telephone, but she's obviously just like fucked and covered in blood. A man and a woman see her and call an ambulance. She gets taken to Leeds General Infirmary again and has this emergency operation. So this all happens on December the 14th. She doesn't get out of that hospital because he's made such of a mess of her until New Year's Eve. She's in there for that long.
Wow. Kind of like he has a bit of his own Christmas break here, because the next murder is 21st January. But I guess if you think that period of time when you are constantly family and friends and stuff like that, it must be quite difficult to try and plan a dreadful attack on a woman during this time.
Yeah, I bet loads of serial killers, it drops off over Christmas. With Marilyn, she was too scared to go back to Leeds for months, because obviously she was like, that's where I was attacked. And then eventually when she returned there, she started work as a sex worker again, because she had to do that. She knew the area and she knew how she could make money when she was in Leeds, so she couldn't really stay anywhere else. But she had this attack led to her having depression for a very long time, and in fact she had a hole in her head from the attack, and her scalp was absolutely covered in scars from him attacking her. So yeah, one of the things they got from the crime scene is near where she collapsed there were some tire marks, and they matched those tracks to the ones that were found by Irene Richardson. A very weird thing happens in January of 1978. So he goes quiet over Christmas, and they basically stopped the investigation in Bradford. And the reason why is they kind of went, we've definitely already interviewed him and we haven't found him. We know we've spoken to him from like everyone they'd spoken to. So they're like, we just have to wait now till more evidence comes up, because there's no point endlessly asking the same, 15,000 men the same questions and having written because there was no computerized system. But imagine, because I think everyone wanted to find him. Imagine being a policeman who's just like, yeah, we know he's there, but we can't do anything, so we just have to stop for a bit.
Well, there was that copper that several times said that they thought that it was Peter Sutcliffe, and several times went in and said, look, I think it's this guy, you need to look at him, and then either things got lost or they didn't follow it up, or... I just think there's a lot of mistakes and a lot of arrogance in the police at that time, where I was surprised if a detective wouldn't want, a PC telling them what they thought. George Oldfield's not going to listen to a Bobby on the beat, is he? Saying, look, I think it's this guy. He's going to be like, I'll fucking find out myself, mate. I just think there was a lot of that attitude going on.
There was definitely lots of, hierarchy, arrogance going on.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's gross. It's really hard, that, isn't it, that, you get the feeling that egos got in the way of him being found any sooner. And definitely what we're going to talk about on our next episode with Weirdside Jack, that is definitely the case there, and it definitely led to people being murdered. Have you ever worked for a boss who you know is doing something bad out of purely their own arrogance?
I haven't actually. I suppose that's quite a... I've worked with bosses who I think have been absolute cunts, who are absolutely bone idle and will bully everybody else into making it look like they're not doing anything. I've worked with that kind of person, but I've never worked with anyone that's actually doing something, really bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, never had that. I mean, I have to admit, I love nothing more than sticking the boot into my old boss.
Really?
Oh my God, one absolute cunt of a woman. Genuinely, one of the worst human beings I have ever met in my life. And I know you shouldn't, I don't bear grudges. I just cut people off. I don't have this thing of hatred or whatever. But I found out recently that she'd fallen off a bike and hurt both of her arms, and I was just like,
fucking hell.
No, I'm sorry. She was a bully. She was nasty. She was sneaky. She was lazy. She had all the poor qualities of leadership
Snow White dwarf.
And of everything.
She was bashful.
Genuine, just. Well, she wasn't actually. If she was, that would have made a bit of a difference. But an absolute fucking drip she was. And nothing makes me happier to think that she's still festering at that old job, miserable, with a boring husband who she always moaned about, still married to him, with a little daughter who was a cunt. So happy that she's still in that life cycle. And long may it continue.
This is, I've never seen you be so venomous and gleeful at the same time.
Oh, I've got she was genuine, and it's not just me that says this. I was never frightened of her, but people used to be frightened of her. She sort of bred that kind of culture of, she was very apathetic, but yet everyone was frightened of her. And I was like, why is everyone fucking frightened of this fucking boring woman? The only thing she had in her life was jogging.
Wow.
That's one of those, starts doing 10Ks and stuff. Yeah, arsehole. I wish her nothing but the worst.
Well, that's a lovely segment. We should have it on every podcast. On this week's episode of Wishing You Nothing But the Worst.
It'll just be her every week.
So, after Marilyn's attack, because it went quiet, they assumed that he was so sort of scared about her surviving and being found that he stopped. But that is also because he committed a murder on January 21st, but she wasn't found until the end of March. So the police wrongly assumed that he had just stopped and given up. And this is Yvonne Pearson.
Yeah, Yvonne Pearson, who was 21 years old. She was working as a sex worker. She'd left her 2 children with a neighbour that evening, and she'd gone to the Flying Dutchman pub. She'd left there around 9:30 p.m. Told a friend that she was going to earn some money. Now she had a lot on her mind because she was due in court in 5 days' time for soliciting, and she was very concerned that this wasn't a first offence, and she was like, I think I might go to prison. So that night, Peter Sutcliffe was being very helpful as usual. He was helping his parents move into their new house, which was right near the centre of Bingley. So when his brother and his dad say, hey, Peter, do you want to stay for a drink? He's like, oh, no, I'm going to get off. I need to go home. And they assume, he wants to get back to Sonia. Because obviously Sonia's got all these mental health problems and she's a bit, clingy in some ways. So he's...
Can I just say, I bet he would have... do you know the kind of guy who massively trades on, like, their girlfriend's personality to get out of stuff they don't want to do? Do you know the kind who's like, also like, I've caught boyfriends of mine in the past doing it about, like, lying about me and be like, yeah, I just told them that you don't like it when I go out with my mates, and I'm like, well, why the fuck did you tell them that? Because that is not the case, and it makes me sound like an absolute fucking hooter. Like, what?
Yeah, it's weird. That is such a weird thing to do. Or like, I can't come out because Sandra's got one of her headaches.
Yeah.
So, that kind of stuff. Like, she's not been well.
Kiri's having a heavy period, so I've got to go back home. I don't think my partner now is not the kind of person who would do it. Also, like, all my partner's friends are also my friends. So if he was like, I can't come out because Kiri's feeling a bit delicate, they'd be like, Kiri, I'm sure she'll be fucking fine. Just leave her on her own. He's more likely to go, Kiri's smashing shit up around the house because she's got it into her head that I've done something wrong. They'll be like, all right, that's fair, let me go.
Yeah, it's a weird... But I reckon he probably would use that quite a lot. It'd have been like, Sonia's not feeling well, or Sonia's having a tough time at work.
Played the Sonia card.
Definitely.
People do it with kids as well. Some people have got kids that I'm like, have they got a wasting disease? Because they are so sick all the time... They should probably be in a ward somewhere.
Yeah, have you considered either a sort of medical professional to really examine this child, or it's so ill so often, Make-A-Wish Foundation? Because it sounds like that this little thing isn't going to see adulthood from the amount of things that's wrong with it. And it's really funny because it always seems to be ill when we have arrangements.
Yeah. It's dark, that, to lie about your kids... Or
yeah, it is a bit,
but I imagine what they're doing is actually turning their kids' mild ailment up to 11. So the kid's like, I've got my head hurts, and they're like, I can't come out tonight because my child has a brain tumour or whatever.
My gran was great for this because sometimes, even like in my 20s, I didn't want to go out, and I'd be like, I cannot be asked getting dressed up to go to town. You're just not in the mood sometimes, are you? And these have been nights that have been arranged for fucking weeks. So I'd just be like, and my gran would be like, you don't really want to go, do you, love? I'd be like, not really. She's like, tell them I'm not well. And I was like, I can't say that. She's like, honestly, tell them I'm not well. Tell them I'm not well and it'll all be fine. And I used to be like, all right. And then I'd be like, really sorry, my gran's not feeling very well. And she'd be like, I used to stay in and watch Cabin.
Tell them I've had a fall. Tell them I've slipped in the bath.
Yeah, that's it. Tell them something's wrong. Tell them I'm not well. Tell them, that's it. Tell them I've had a fall. I'm like, I can't lie about that. You can. It's fine. I've said you can. Tell them I'm not well. What we're talking... Who we've been on about? Oh, yeah. So, he says he don't want to stay for a drink. He's going to go... They assume, he's just going to go back to Sonia. He doesn't go back to Sonia. He headed to Lum Lane again. And he sees Yvonne, and they agree on £5. And this is another incident where Yvonne was actually going to get in a different car, but then decided to get into... I guess maybe... I mean, when you got to keep your wits about you, you probably have to make decisions based on how something looks at times. And I suppose he's quite smart, isn't he? His car's not a shit car. It's quite
he's
it's all
petite.
tidy.
I would look at him and be like, I reckon I could have him in a fight, because I wouldn't assume that he's carrying a fucking hammer with him.
Yeah, so I think there's all these things you've got to weigh up when you're, having to do that kind of work. So they agree £5. He takes her to Drummond's Mill waste ground. Now, that's actually where his father worked. So it's the waste ground behind where his father worked.
That's grubby. Yeah. I'll take it to where my dad worked.
Yvonne gets out of the car and he hits her straight away several times with a walling hammer, which I don't know what that is, but it sounds pretty awful. Now, at this point, another car pulls up beside him. So he panics then, and he doesn't finish what he's doing, and he drags her across the wasteland to near where there's an old sofa. Now, this is horrible, so strap him. She's making noises because obviously she's had these awful head injuries, and she's sort of groaning. And he grabs horsehair from the stuffing of the sofa and shoves it in her mouth to shut her up, and he starts holding her nose as well. So the car leaves eventually. As Peter Sutcliffe said, it seemed like hours and hours and hours that the car was there. So when the car eventually leaves, and it's horrible having to talk about this, but I think it's important to talk about what he actually did, because to make him out, to show him what the horrible man that he is. He kicked her to death. He stamped on her head, and then he hid her body under some soil and then put the sofa on top of her.
It's fucking grim. Horrible.
Now, she was reported missing on the Monday, and some people sort of thought, maybe she's, done a bit of maybe she's done a runner because she was really worried about this court case. She might have, gone somewhere else to lay low for a little bit, but obviously that wasn't the case. And then on Easter Sunday, the 26th of March 1978, so this is 2 months later, a passerby was going across the wasteland, and he saw an arm sticking out from under a sofa. And he said there was an awful smell. But at first he thought, that's a tailor's dummy. And when he went over, he realised that it was an actual body. Now, she'd been beaten so badly she was completely unrecognisable. And now this is the weird thing, and this is where I think Peter Sutcliffe's lying as well. The police didn't believe it would have taken so long for her to be found if her arm was sticking out from under the sofa. They were like, that would have been found straight away. There was a copy of the Daily Mirror newspaper, which was dated the 21st of February, which is 1 month after the murder, looked like it had been deliberately placed at the scene with the body. Peter Sutcliffe denies that he went back to that body, which I don't believe for a minute. I 100% think he went back and did this, and I think he went back because he wanted her to be found.
Do you think he was always acting alone?
See, do you know what? When you asked that, one of the things I thought when it said he was waving at somebody, and he said, it's my girlfriend, my first thought there was, I wonder if he had somebody with him, or somebody that he was working with, that was my first thought. Maybe he was like, because, I don't know, what do you think?
I don't know. Some of these attacks, it's like, it's just a lot for one person to do, some of this stuff. And they're going backwards and forwards as well. I don't know. I guess he was always late and he got fired for it, which would make sense if he's driving around, fucking around with bodies till 4 o'clock in the morning. But it just seems like, I don't know, they're going back, they're pulling her arm out, putting a copy of the paper underneath, and him being like, I didn't do it. It'd be weird for him not to admit it because he's admitted nearly everything else so far. But it does sound like something he could tell someone to do. I don't know. And
I think with this one, he wouldn't admit it because when he went back to Jean Jordan, he was going back for a purpose. So, it's like with this one, I think he's got no purpose to go back. Because why would he want the body to be found, really? If he's killed, he's like, I've got away with it 100% here. But I think he wants them to be found for his own sort of, like, gratification. Yeah. But also, I think he gets pissed off when it's like... obviously he wants them to be found, because I think he gets some kind of kick out of reading about the women and finding out who they were.
I think that's the trophy element of it, right? I think he probably kept newspaper clippings. I don't know what he did.
Yeah.
But, like, the fact that he is, like, religiously checking the newspapers, has it been in the newspapers yet, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I don't know. With this one, I think it probably was him. And also the fact that it's over Easter Sunday, that suggests to me, so Easter Saturday, bank holiday weekend, he's not working, he's got time. He's got time to go and do this.
Yeah. But wasn't the newspaper dated, it's a month after the murder, but that's still a month before the body's found. But I guess if you have an old paper, you can put it whenever, can't you?
Yeah, I don't know, it's a weird one, but I definitely think it was him. I definitely think he went
it's fucking weird for anyone else to do it.
The police, though, they didn't link it with the Ripper at the time. They said the head injuries that she'd suffered were so huge that they were like, this is a different kind of attack.
Oh, because he had a new hammer, because of the walling hammer.
It's because of the stamping as well.
Oh, fucking hell, yeah. Ugh.
So they were like, they didn't link it at first to the other murders. Ugh, it's such a... I mean, they're all horrible, but that's a particular...
yeah, he just gets worse and worse, doesn't he? Then we get to January 31st, 1978. So this is the murder of Helen Ritka. I think I'm saying her name right. Now, Helen
Ritka
was a sister of Rita Ritka. They're two sisters. They're identical twins. They have an Italian mum and a Jamaican dad. If you look at them, they are two of the most gorgeous women you've ever seen. They're really, really beautiful. Helen was only 18 when she died. The two girls, I think, had quite a spicy upbringing. Stuff had gone on. So by the time they're 18, they're living together in a one-bedroom room next to a motorway flyover in Huddersfield. Which isn't the fairy tale that you imagine it to be.
I mean, this is going to sound really awful. You know, when I find out people have been to university in Huddersfield, I'm always like, I've got nothing against Huddersfield, but to me it always seems because it's such a big university town. I'm always like, why? I don't know what it is. It's just always one of those things that's always...
Is that the one with the amazing gig there? Is it the Lawrence Batley Theatre?
Yeah,
it's a really nice gig. Yeah. It's just all of these murders, because we know so much about them. You feel like you know these women, and there's so many times during this story about Helen where I feel like I'm rooting for her, where she just nearly got away so many times. So for a start, the two women used to kind of work together in the red light district to keep themselves safer. They were really fucking smart. They would always take the car registration down of where their sister had went, and so they knew the client's reg number, and they had a meeting point, and they would meet back there every 20 minutes, and that way they were always checking in on each other every 20 minutes. So January 31st, it's fucking freezing, it's snowing. Helen goes to the meeting point. Now she's 5 minutes early, so she's standing there waiting for Rita, and then this car pulls up, this Ford Cortina, and a guy says, do you want to have sex for a £5? And she's like, you know what, I can do this in 5 minutes and be back. So she goes, yeah, okay. So she gets in the car and they go to Garrad's Timber Yard. Now, this is just around the corner from there, and apparently is a common spot for sex workers to take clients because it's quite sort of secluded. So he says, listen, why don't we have sex on the back seat? So as she's getting into the back seat, he tries to hit her with a hammer, and she sort of dodges out the way, and it misses her and hits his door. Now she screams, and he hits her again. He hits her, and she collapses down. Now, as she collapses down, he realises, not very far from him, there's two taxi drivers just fucking stood by smoking, having a chat outside their cars. So he's like, fuck. So he grabs her by the hair, and he drags her round the back of this timber yard. And he's hitting her all the time with a hammer, because she's got defensive wounds on her arms from covering herself. So he lies on top of her and covers her mouth so she can't scream and the taxi drivers can't hear. And as he lies there waiting for the taxi drivers to go, the account I read said he has sex with her. He doesn't have sex with her because sex is consensual. He rapes her. That's what he does. He holds his hand over her mouth so her screams can't be heard, and he rapes her and waits for the taxi drivers to go. So when they go, he's like, fuck, where's this hammer? So he starts searching for his hammer, and as he does, she fucking gets up after all this and starts to run away. So Sutcliffe hits her again with a hammer. She's still alive. Like, she's fighting so hard. Like, I found it so, like, and not like if you fight hard enough you can get away from a murderer, because that's just not the case. But like, you know, when she must have had that adrenaline of like, I could get away from it. It just really fucking fucks my head. So he drags her back to the car, and in the car he's got a kitchen knife, and he stabs her through the abdomen with that, and that is what kills her. So Rita goes back to the meeting place expecting Helen to be there. She's not there, and she's like, oh, for fuck's sake, she's probably gone home without me, it's freezing. So she goes back to the flat, she's not there. This is on Tuesday, and she's like, shit, this is Tuesday night. She's like, oh fuck.
Yeah.
So all day Wednesday she's like, I want to call the police, but what am I going to say? Oh, I'm a sex worker, says my sister, please don't arrest us, I can't find her, she's missing. So eventually on the Thursday, which is the 2nd of Feb, she phones the police and says, listen, my sister is missing, she looks like this. And then the next day, a sniffer dog, a German Shepherd, finds Helen's body.
After this, there is something that then happens, which kind of, I mean, as if it's not been difficult enough and not the greatest investigation in the world ever, part one. There's someone who comes into it who kind of fucks up everything and pulls focus from what should have been concentrated on. And that is Wearside Jack, who is going to be an episode of himself, I think.
Yeah, I've watched a couple of documentaries, one pre being found, one post being found, and I think we're going to slot in as we're part 3, or is this part 3? No, part 4 is going to be an episode on Wearside Jack in itself. Also, it might be some fucking light relief from discussing women being horrifically murdered.
Like, it sounds awful. It sounds awful to say, but 100%. That's why I wanted to do this early this morning, because I didn't want to be like talking about these horrible things at like in the afternoon. I don't know if it feels better to just do it, doesn't it? Sometimes, like, this is going to be pretty horrible. Let's talk about these things early.
Oh, really? I more think it's quite brutal to get up out of bed and be eating some porridge whilst talking about all this. It's like that there was no bed that Goldilocks did that on, did they? And this one is just right, and that's why I can't sleep at night.
Have you been eating porridge? Is that what you're eating?
I think technically it's oat bran with chia seed and almond butter.
Oh.
Yes.
Well, I hope everyone's having a pleasant lockdown.
Yes.
Do you know what I guarantee? There's going to be some middle-class cunts, right, that every year they can be like, yeah, so, like, because of the lockdown, like, back in the day, like, I literally have to do it every year for myself. I literally have to go away and, like, have a lockdown for, like, a month just on my own, like, and that's something, a tradition that I'm going to keep now.
God.
I guarantee it.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right. Those posh cunts with the red argy, you mean?
Oh, yeah. Well, do you know what? This really pissed me off. So I'm staying... Also, here's the thing for you. So I'm staying... Very lucky to be here. My boyfriend's parents have... You know, they've got a lovely house. They said, come and stay with us instead of being stuck in London. This was before the lockdown, before people start. So all this is blown over, fine. And his mum has a lovely Aga. And... I've been getting shit because someone's got an Aga. Now, for a start, this is an old farmhouse, and a lot of farmhouses just have Agas.
Yeah, my
anyway.
farmhouse had.
It is like a standard thing that they have because it's better for the house, isn't it? It heats,
and also
it's
the way farms work, it just the idea of them works better. So like that you can slowly cook your food. That there's a hot kettle all the time, so people going in and out, and like it just works for farm life.
Oh, yeah, so I get messages because I've cooked on an Aga that I'm a class traitor, that I'm this, I'm that. Do you know what? Stick it up your fucking asses, because I genuinely couldn't give a fuck what you think. Like, how dare people message me and assume something about me because of a cooker that I'm cooking on? Seriously, I blocked people because of it. You can fuck off. You're absolute babies, right? for somebody who was genuine working class, for somebody who has worked since they were 16, for somebody who's never been to university, hasn't done A-levels, I think I've done all right? And do you know what? If I wanted to buy a fucking Aga for myself, I would. And I wouldn't take any shit off you cunts for telling me that.
No, Rachel, if you're going to be working class, you have to stay working class forever. Like, you should never try and improve your station in life. Those are the rules.
Oh, of course. I'm so sorry. I forgot about that. What do I need to do?
If you're not cooking on a camping stove in a council house, you might as well fucking kill yourself, mate. You're the problem. You're the reason the coronavirus has spread.
Right. So I should be crawling under a spinning chimney. Right. Got ya. Yeah, it really fucks me off, And a lot of the people that have said to me, had a little dig at me because there's an Aga in the house that I happen to be in. First of all, fucking grow up, you absolute babies. But secondly, you're very, very middle class and you pretend to be working class, which actually is a bigger sin than me making a chili on a fucking Aga. So suck my fucking working class dick on it.
As a middle class person who grew up with an Aga on a farm, I can say they're absolutely lovely to cook on.
Well, do you know what? They're a delight. And they're nice, lovely to make a cup of toast. Very good on it.
I tell you what, though, because you can't smell when it's burning, so my dad would, put food in and then forget. So there's so many times when I'd hear him swearing from the kitchen, and he'd put sausages in to make lunch, forgotten about the sausages, made everyone sandwiches, and then at night these 4 black briquettes in the shape of a sausage would be thrown into the dog bowl, and he's like, "This fucking bastard thing has fucking cremated them," like it was the Arga's choice to do it and not him.
They've been in there for 6 hours.
Unbelievable.
The poor dog just fucking.
Someone I know has a famous comedian that has an Aga in their house. They don't use it very often. They switch it on and off at Christmas, basically, when it gets cold. And they went into they put mince pies on, forgot about them, and then the next year they went to open the thing, and there was just these black little things that were mince pies that had been cooked for a year in an Aga.
For a year.
I think they were just diamonds in a tray after that.
I have to say as well, stop being so. When people assume that I should be, because I should be working class because I'm working class. When people assume that I should stay that because of how I sound or whatever, it's very what's the word? It's like you're going. It's stereotyping somebody. It's like going, oh well, you're that, so you stay that. You. It's like, do you know what? I am allowed nice things. I work very hard. I'm allowed nice things. So if anyone, and I don't have to justify my background or anything to anybody. I don't have to. All you need to know about me is that I am working class. I don't have to justify anything to anybody. And if I want to fucking cook on an Aga, then I fucking will. So there we go.
Shove it up your Aga is what she's saying to you.
Showed up your Aga.
Thanks so much for listening. Sorry there's so many of these podcasts, but there's just so much to cover. So we'll be doing Wareside Jack the next episode.
Also, who are these people saving up these episodes? Yeah. What are you saving them up for? You are in lockdown.
I think it's because sometimes we have long breaks before we do the episodes succinctly. So they'll watch it, they'll listen to it, and then 4 weeks later.
Yeah,
but we are getting them out quite quick. We've both got work on, but we're trying to do as much as we can. Yeah, so I get the logic, but you're gonna have to wait about a month till it's all out because there's so much to talk about. By which time we'll be back at work.
Have 8 hours of.
Thank you to everyone who came to the COVID Arms. It's still happening at the moment every Saturday. And don't do that thing where you're like, can I pay for shows that have been? No, because you wouldn't say that about any other live comedy show. The next one's got Rose Matafeo, Danny McLaughlin and Ross Noble on, and Robbie Kavanagh doing music. So it'll be absolutely brilliant. Tickets are £2. They're on my website. Thank you very much for everyone who's come along and supported so far. It's been great.
I'm doing bits and bobs on the old Instagram. Instagram Live is a very good tool.
Really?
I think it's very good. Yeah, I think
I'd love to use it, but I don't know what I would use it for. I just think I'm so underwhelming. I don't know who would watch it.
Hey, listen, people do watch. People are starved of anything at the moment, and they're just happy to get involved.
The little people, yeah.
I do wish some of my family members would stop fucking watching it though. We're doing agony aunt session. I'll be do a couple more of those, and I'm going to do a couple more things that I've come up with. But I read an erotic story. You all seem to enjoy that. So I had to. So my niece is on Instagram. She's only 13, and when she saw I was doing something, I had to message my sister and say, "Can you tell her not to watch this because it's not suitable?" She still watched.
Really?
Little shit.
That'll be your
kept seeing her popping up.
That'll be your sister watching, but doing it on her phone.
Do you know that's probably true? That she's very what's it with their social media?
Oh, is she on it?
All the logins, checks everything. Yeah, she's very good. I mean, that's one thing I'll give her.
You're a generous and giving soul, mate.
I really am.
Well, this has been the All Killa No Filler podcast. That is part 3 of episode 69. Police Academy, back in the habit, or whatever the fuck we're calling it now. We'll see you soon. Keep safe. Keep washing your hands. Bye.
Are you going to stop recording now?